This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Xiomaro, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about communication. There are a lot of team-based pseudo-competitive games out there at the moment. Dota 2, Overwatch, and two of my favorites right now, Apex Legends and Battlerite. And if you've ever been on Reddit, you know just how much people like to complain about their teammates. So if you could get a better performance out of your team, why would you not do it? Communication is one way to do that. Now don't get me wrong, no matter how you communicate with your team, it's not going to turn them from Potato Aim McGee into Shroud. So I'm not going to claim that good communication is going to be the difference between gold rank and diamond, but the thing is, no communication doesn't necessarily help the situation, and bad communication actually hurts your chances of winning. I usually prefer to suggest what you should do rather than what you shouldn't, but I see so many issues with communication that the don'ts need to be addressed as well. So first off, don't tell people what to do. Now, if you're thinking, but isn't that what communication is about? You really need to hear this. No one elected you as leader of the team. And let's be real, you're probably in a game with a bunch of other people who are the same rank as you. So what do you think gives you the right to tell people how they should play when they're your equals? And even if you do end up in a game with a bunch of people who are lower ranked than you, telling people what they should do and how they should play still isn't as helpful as you think it is. The truth of the matter is, there's more than one playstyle in any given game. If nothing else, you'll always have the more passive players and the more aggressive players. Both playstyles can totally work. So if you're a passive player and you're trying to stop your aggressive teammates from doing what they do best, you're actually hurting your chances of winning. That's if they listen, of course. If they don't listen, you're still just creating unnecessary noise. And this actually extends beyond telling people how to play on a micro level too. You should also be careful not to elect yourself as the shot caller. Again, no one asked you to do that. Yes, shot callers are great and even required in a pre-made team, but we're talking about communicating with randoms here. You can try making one strategic call if you like, and if people seem to listen, then fine, just carry on. Just be warned that part of what makes a shot caller work in pre-mades doesn't carry over to random games. If you've ever played in a semi-competitive team, you'll know that there's a common rule. Whatever the shot caller says goes, even if you disagree. So if you have any issues with the calls, you bring it up after the game, not during. In solo queue games, you don't have this agreement. So if someone disagrees with you, best case scenario, they'll ignore you. Worst case, they start arguing with you. You really don't want this to happen. So go ahead and make a call once if you like, but if people don't listen, just stop. Sure, there are outlier cases where you end up with a really cooperative and trusting team, but more often than not, telling people what to do and how to play is going to hurt your chances of winning. If nothing else, you might make your teammates second guess themselves and hesitate to make a play they'd normally be confident in making. Let's move on to another way of communicating that can work, but you need to be a little bit careful. Feedback. Feedback can be positive or negative, and it should always be handled carefully. While I just said you shouldn't tell your team what to do, sometimes you do need to give feedback. Positive feedback is a little bit easier to deal with. If someone makes a good play, just make a short response. Don't be one of those people who overpraises their team for making good plays. They're not children, so being overly positive can come across as patronizing. But you definitely should compliment your team from time to time if they do something cool. Just make it short and sweet. And if you're giving positive feedback, it makes it easier to give negative feedback too. Same rules apply, of course. Keep it short and sweet. But with negative feedback, try to phrase it as a suggestion rather than a criticism. So rather than say something like, "Reaper, can you please kill their Roadhog?" say something like, "Their Roadhog is constantly on the flank, try and punish him, Reaper." That way, you're not criticizing their gameplay, you're giving them information and a suggestion. Maybe they didn't even realize the Roadhog was flanking constantly. Well, now they know and they can maybe do something about it. As I said though, feedback can be tricky. If you phrase things the wrong way, or if your teammate is just a little sensitive, they might take it the wrong way and start acting up. So if you're unsure whether or not to give feedback, err on the side of caution and maybe just keep quiet. There are way more useful things you could be saying anyway. So moving on, here's something you should do: listen. Remember that communication is a two-way thing. I would even argue that listening is more important than what you say. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should blindly follow what your teammates tell you, but actually if more people listened, shot calling in random games might actually work. but most people don't listen. Or maybe they listen, but they don't really act on the information they're given. A good step towards contributing more to your team through communication is listening to what your teammates have to say and acting on it. That way you can also learn for yourself what is and isn't good information. Let's say your teammate tells you there's a Genji in your back line with no dash. That's great information to act on. A Genji with no dash and out of position is a super easy pick. So if you hear someone make a call like that, do something about it. And that kinda gives you a hint at the most important thing you can contribute: information. I've tried so many different approaches to communicating with random teammates over the years. Trying to be a shot caller works once in a blue moon, and it is fun when it works. Giving constructive feedback can work sometimes, but sometimes you just end up pissing off your entire team if they're in a bad mood. But one thing that is always useful is information. Of course, not all information is equal, but if you can give your team the right information, it's gonna help a lot. The most basic and useful piece of information you can give is enemy positions. If an enemy is standing somewhere they shouldn't be, i.e. they're overextended and they've burnt their escapes, call that. Tell your teammate they have no cooldowns and where they are, because everybody wants to be a fragger, so if you dangle some low-hanging fruit in front of your team, they're going to jump at the chance. The same thing applies when you're trying to make a play. Say, for example, you have your ultimate ready. Tell people you're looking to use it. In a game like Overwatch, you might have someone tell you that they also have their ultimate coming up, so can you wait for a minute for a combo? If nothing else, it prepares your team for what you're about to do. And importantly, you're not telling them what to do, so they can decide for themselves what they might want to do with it. Essentially, there are 3 pieces of information you're looking for: position, cooldowns, and health. Position includes allies and enemies. If you tell your team an enemy is low but they don't know where they are, how are they going to help finish them off? Likewise, if you need help but your team doesn't know where you are, they can't really do much about it, or at least it will take longer before they can back you up. So the very first thing you need to learn is calling positions. I would actually say if you're only going to give one piece of information, make it positioning. It doesn't matter how low someone might be or whether or not they have any escapes. If people don't know where they are, they can't do anything about it. As for cooldowns, the main ones you're looking for are mobility and defensive abilities. If someone is in a bad position and they have no cooldowns, they're as good as dead if you call it out. There are a few non-defensive cooldowns to watch out for and call too though. Ultimates, for example, can be good information. If you predict that an enemy has an ultimate and you tell your team, it means they can save their own defensives to counter it. But other than that, stick to calling defensive cooldowns. It's interesting actually, in Battle.right, calling cooldowns is pretty common practice. It's just a shame we don't have any voice comms. But in games like Overwatch, people rarely call mobility or defensive cooldowns. If a Winston or D.Va makes a bad jump, it doesn't matter that they're tanks. They're going to melt if you focus them. They should be diving solo or small groups of targets, so if they jump into a death ball, call that they have no jump and watch them die in under a second. Next up, health. So be careful with this one. Don't tell your team someone's low if they're not actually low. Of course, in a lot of games there are healers, so someone could be low and then healed up pretty fast. So first off, make sure they actually are low, and secondly, combine that information with position and or cooldowns. If someone is low and out of position, that's a good call. If someone is low but in a safe position, honestly, it doesn't really matter. They can just duck out of the way and wait for healing. Like I said, people love to jump at the chance of an easy kill. So if you call someone who's low and they're actually in a safe position, you risk your team diving into a dangerous place, not finishing the kill, and dying as a result. So like I said, be careful when calling enemy health. Sometimes it can do more harm than good. Sometimes it can work out well, but if you're ever in doubt, just stick to calling positions and cooldowns. And a quick side note here, I know it's a pretty common opinion, but it's worth mentioning what a great job Respawn Entertainment did with Apex Legends' pinging system. The pinging system is based entirely around giving information to your team. Honestly, you don't even need to use voice comms much in that game because you can give much faster and more precise information by just pinging. Even if you're not into shooters or battle royale games, it's worth checking out that game just for the pinging system. And I really hope more games implement something like that in the future. So there's one last thing I want to touch on in this video, and that is being proactive in your communication. It's no use telling people, "Guys, I need help," after you die. The sooner you can tell people about a potential problem, the better. If you spot someone who could be a problem on the flank, call it out then and there. That would be the best time to call it if you can. If you don't see them coming, then you should call it the second they start trying to kill you. And if they kill you before you even get a chance to call it, you still shouldn't ask for help. Instead, you should be calling position, health, and cooldowns like I mentioned before. I need help doesn't give your team anything to work with. If they know where the enemy is, they might be able to prevent them from killing more of your team. If they know that player is low and out of cooldowns, then they can definitely do something about it. So let's do a quick summary for you. First off, don't tell people what to do. Everybody has different playstyles, and by telling people what to do, you might actually prevent them from doing what they're good at. An overly aggressive player can be great at making space for your team, so just go with it. And a very passive player can act as a great backstop. You can't change the way someone plays in a short play session, so just focus on what you can do, such as giving constructive feedback. As I said, you need to be a little careful with this, but if people are receptive to it, it can make a real difference. Just make sure to give both positive and negative feedback where you can. Next, listen. Honestly, if you're not doing this already, you really need to start listening. Your team will often give you good information to work with, but if you're not listening, you'll miss out on some great opportunities to work as a team. As for what you say, try to stick to calling out positions, cooldowns, and health. And I would say position and cooldowns are more important than health. If someone is out of position and out of escapes, it doesn't matter how much health they have, they're dead. If, on the other hand, someone is low health but they have all their cooldowns and they're in a good position, you might end up dying chasing the kill. Finally, be proactive. It's no use calling something after your opponent has done what they needed to do. Make an effort to call things before they become a problem. The sooner the better. And honestly, that's about it for communication. Sure, some players will be more receptive to certain approaches than others, but giving good information works on all players. Some people might not do anything with the information, but hey, if they don't go for the easy kills when you dangle it in front of them, no type of communication was going to work on them. So just stay positive, stay objective, and most importantly, play to win. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more gaming guides, news, and discussion. And don't forget to check out the links below to Patreon, Discord, and Twitch. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.